The Spanish-American War of 1898 was a short yet highly consequential conflict that transformed the global balance of power, ending Spain's centuries-old colonial empire and marking the rise of the United States as a dominant world power. The origins of the war were rooted in the Cuban struggle for independence from Spanish colonial rule, which had erupted in 1895 under the leadership of figures such as José Martí and General Máximo Gómez. The Cuban revolutionaries sought to free the island from Spanish domination, and their rebellion was met with brutal repression by Spanish authorities, particularly under General Valeriano Weyler, who implemented a harsh reconcentration policy that forced civilians into camps, leading to famine, disease, and the deaths of thousands. These humanitarian disasters deeply shocked American public opinion, which increasingly sympathized with the Cuban cause. The American press, led by sensationalist newspapers such as William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal and Joseph Pulitzer's New York World, exaggerated and dramatized Spanish atrocities, creating widespread outrage in the United States through what became known as yellow journalism. These stories often mixed fact with fiction, intensifying public pressure on the U.S. government to intervene on moral and humanitarian grounds. Tensions escalated further in early 1898 when the United States dispatched the battleship USS Maine to Havana Harbor to protect American citizens and interests during civil unrest in Cuba. On February 15, 1898, the Maine suddenly exploded, killing 266 American sailors. Although the actual cause of the explosion remains uncertain, modern investigations suggest it may have been an internal accident. American newspapers immediately blamed Spain, and public opinion turned decisively in favor of war. The rallying cry, "Remember the Maine! To hell with Spain!" swept across the country, reflecting the patriotic fervor and anger of the American people. Despite Spanish attempts to negotiate, political and popular pressure made war unavoidable. On April 25, 1898, the U.S. Congress formally declared war on Spain, retroactively dating it to April 21, when President William McKinley had ordered a naval blockade of Cuba. The conflict was fought on two principal fronts, the Caribbean and the Pacific. In the Pacific Ocean, Commodore George Dewey led the U.S. Navy's Asiatic Squadron from Hong Kong to the Philippines, where on May 1, 1898, he decisively defeated the Spanish fleet in the Battle of Manila Bay, without losing a single American life. This victory effectively destroyed Spanish naval power in the Pacific and opened the way for the eventual U.S. occupation of the Philippines. In the Caribbean, American forces composed of both regular troops and volunteers, including the famous Rough Riders, led by Lieutenant Colonel Theodore Roosevelt, landed in Cuba in June 1898. The campaign included fierce fighting at Las Guasimas, El Caney, and the Battle of San Juan Hill, where Roosevelt's charge became legendary in American history and myth. Despite being poorly equipped and suffering from tropical diseases such as malaria and yellow fever, the American and Cuban forces gradually overwhelmed Spanish resistance. At sea, the U.S. Navy demonstrated its growing technological superiority. The decisive naval engagement occurred on July 3, 1898, at the Battle of Santiago de Cuba, where Admiral Pascual Cervera's Spanish fleet attempted to break through the American blockade, but was completely destroyed. With the fall of Santiago and the surrender of Spanish forces in Cuba soon after, the conflict in the Caribbean effectively ended. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, American troops, aided by Filipino revolutionaries led by Emilio Aguinaldo, took control of Manila in August 1898, completing the conquest of the Philippines. The war officially concluded with the signing of the Treaty of Paris on December 10, 1898. Under its terms, Spain relinquished its claim to Cuba, which became a nominally independent nation under U.S. supervision, and ceded Puerto Rico and Guam to the United States. The Philippines were sold to the U.S. for $20 million, marking America's entry into Asian colonialism.
The treaty was controversial in the United States, sparking heated debates between imperialists, who saw overseas expansion as a sign of national greatness, and anti-imperialists, who argued that ruling foreign peoples contradicted the democratic ideals of the American Revolution. The consequences of the Spanish-American War were profound and far-reaching. For Spain, the defeat marked the final collapse of its once vast overseas empire, reducing it to a secondary European power and triggering internal political reflection and reform. For the United States, the war signified the beginning of its transformation into a global power, with territories and strategic bases in both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. It also laid the groundwork for future interventions in Latin America and Asia, reflecting the expansionist spirit of the era known as the Age of Imperialism. The annexation of the Philippines led to the bloody Philippine-American War, 1899 to 1902, as Filipino nationalists resisted U.S. rule, exposing the contradictions of America's new imperial ambitions. The Spanish-American War, lasting barely 4 months, was thus a pivotal event in world history, short in duration but immense in consequence, ushering in the 20th century with the United States as a major political, economic, and military power on the global stage.